You ever met someone with such questionable intelligence that you just have to sit there and admire them for what they are? I'm not going to say what they are, but you know what they are, don't you, Michael? Taking a break from concerning all of the Michaels of the world, I want to talk to you about someone that perfectly encapsulates that previous paragraph I just yapped at you. McArthur Wheeler, a quite unremarkable fellow whose unbridled stupidity contributed to the field of psychology. Now you may be asking, what possibly could have this oxymoronic moron contributed to the study of the human psyche? I'll detail how failed bank heist, lemon juice, and a tiny bit of research can explain the unwarranted amount of confidence that anti-vaxxers have on those horrendous Jubilee videos. I am HugoIsHorrible, and allow me to tell you about McArthur Wheeler and the Dunning-Kruger effect. We're going to jump right into the action here and visit January 6th. No, not that January 6th. This one took place in 1995. On this day, two men, McArthur Wheeler and Clifton Earl Johnson, decided to stick up two banks in the Pittsburgh area. One of the banks being in the Brighton Heights neighborhood of Pittsburgh, and the one of our focus being the Mellon Bank in Swissvale. These robberies earned these guys two things. One, they were able to successfully steal $5,200 from the bank. Yippee! They were also able to get their uncovered faces caught on surveillance cameras. Boo! Okay, let me take this thing off. Yep, these two guys robbed these banks without any form of mask. They just went inside with a gun and stole this money expecting to get away with it. But what could have gone through these guys' heads to make them think that they could rob a bank without any form of facial covering? It was due to this guy right here, the Lemon. Now, let me explain. When Wheeler was arrested, he divulged all his dirty little details about his robberies, including his noticeable lack of thieving fashion. Even as the detectives were detailing the press, they were said to be laughing and chuckling at the notions that Wheeler had just confessed to them. The detectives told the press that someone told him that if you put lemon juice on your face, it makes you invisible to the surveillance cameras. Now, I gotta give Wheeler some credit on this, because apparently he was pretty skeptical about the plausibility of this invisibility. However, he still attempted to test his newfound theory. He put the stinging lemon juice all over his face, which isn't hyperbole by the way, because he literally described it as a burning sensation going all over his eyes and face. He even noted that he had to squint due to his inability to see. After applying this liquid of supposed invisibility all over his face, he snapped a picture, and to his surprise, he was nowhere to be seen.
Change the world. My final message. Goodbye.
Now, there is some actual science behind this and not just a baseless claim. Lemon juice can actually be used as invisible ink. I've personally seen it used a lot in escape rooms where you need to figure out a secret message by using a heat source to reveal it. To reveal how this works to you all, I've written a super secret message on this piece of paper that is going to be revealed with none other than a flat iron. So, let's see what this says. Other than my horrible handwriting, this is proof of theory. It works. The way this worked is actually pretty interesting. When you write with lemon juice, it goes on clear because it's made up of water and other substances such as citric acid and sugar. And yes, contrary to popular belief, there is sugar in lemons. When you heat the paper with fire, or in this case a flat iron, the hidden writing reappears as a dark brown color. That's because the lemon juice goes through chemical changes that make it darken faster than the rest of the paper. The sugars in the lemon juice caramelize when heated, forming dark brown compounds. At the same time, the citric acid weakens the cellulose fibers that is binding the paper together, making those areas more susceptible to heat. As a result, the lemon-treated parts oxidize and burn more quickly than the untreated paper. This combination of the caramelization and the acid-base degradation of the cellulose causes your writing to turn brown, and suddenly your invisible ink isn't so invisible anymore. So now that we know this, did McArthur Wheeler actually vanish? Is he just an idiot? Yeah, he's just an idiot. Some of the theories that were proposed were maybe that he just had bad film or he took the picture at a different angle. Whatever happened, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because Wheeler truly believed that the lemon juice made him invisible, not invincible. With this newfound power, you could say, he decided to rob banks. As I mentioned before, Wheeler and Johnson robbed the banks at 2:47 p.m. on January 6, 1995. 3 months later, okay, look, I'm sorry guys, but I just want to vent about this, but they had the guy's face in 1995. He obviously isn't a criminal mastermind with a secret hideout in the Caribbean to indulge in his grand heist of 5,000 US dollars. Guess you want to know where he was? You want to know where he was in that entire 3 months? He was in Pittsburgh the entire time. He was still in the same city where he committed these crimes. It doesn't matter that he was still in the same city. It still took law enforcement 3 whole months, 90 days, to find the guy whose whole face that they had, who stayed in the same area where he committed the crimes. I'm sorry, but it just dumbfounds me how it took them 3 months to find this guy. And then again, law enforcement didn't even find him. They found him with help from the community. On April 19th on the 11 p.m. news, Wheeler's face appeared on a segment called Pittsburgh Crime Stoppers. This program was aimed to enable the community to provide tips to catch criminals on the run or to gather information. This program proved surprisingly effective because at 12:10 a.m. the same night, Wheeler's 3-month reign of terror was put to an end. And in terms of Johnson's case, he was arrested like 2 weeks after the robberies. In a timely manner, may I add. I find it so funny the amount of confidence that Wheeler had in his plan. He must have been completely unaware that he had his face on full display whenever he committed these robberies. I say this because whenever the police showed him photos of him committing the crime, he was reported to have a shocked look on his face. He was so shocked that he apparently exclaimed in great confusion, "But I wore the lemon juice! But I wore the lemon juice!" I wasn't the only one that found this funny, because this story managed to reach a professor at Cornell University, where Wheeler planted a seed inside of his head that led to the discovery of a major theory within psychology. David Dunning was that professor. This accomplished man received his Bachelor's of Arts from Michigan State, his PhD from Stanford, and then he eventually found tenure at Cornell University. Almost a year after the initial crimes, the 1996 World Almanac recounted this tale in a section called Offbeat News Stories on page 975. Just a quick heads up before we continue, I tried to find this story in that version of the almanac, but try as I might, I cannot find it. Apparently there might be different versions of that same year's almanac circulating through the press, and I probably just had the wrong version. I mean, I even looked through the 1995 and the 97 versions and nothing, so that's totally on me and I'm sorry about that. After reading this elusive paragraph, David Dunning found the original article that was posted within the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. There, he read all about Wheeler's wonderful mishaps, and as he was reading, he thought it conjectured that could possibly explain why this guy did what he did. Dunning thought that if Wheeler was too stupid to be a bank robber, maybe he was too stupid to know that he was too stupid to be a bank robber.
Huh?
I just love and hate the way Dunning speaks in general. One of the articles that I researched was an interview with Dunning where he detailed one of the inspirations that he had for this theory. He mentioned a speech by Donald Rumsfeld at a NATO press conference. If you look at the speech yourself, you can definitely see the influence onto Dunning's wording.
Reports that say that something hasn't happened are always interesting to me because, as we know, there are known knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't know.
I want to focus on a certain part of Rumsfeld's speech where he says that there are unknown unknowns. Things that we don't know that we don't know. This is what Dunning himself obsessed over. This is where Dunning's explanation of Wheeler's actions comes from. What if Wheeler was truly too stupid to know that he was too stupid to rob banks? This idea fascinated him enough that he wanted to prove it academically. So him and a graduate student by the name of Dunning-Kruger decided to do so. Fast forward to 1999, where their joint paper is released titled Unskilled and Unaware of It. how difficulties in recognizing one's own incompetence led to inflated self-assessments. You know, if anybody in academia is good at one thing, it's creating titles that just roll off the tongue. In their paper, they tested the theory that people hold favorable views of their abilities in many social and intellectual domains. I specifically like how they worded it in their concluding remarks section of their paper. We propose that those with limited knowledges in a domain suffer a dual burden. Not only do they reach mistaken conclusions and make regrettable errors, but their incompetence robs them of the ability to realize it. To test their theory, Dunning-Kruger ran a variety of different experiments to test how people felt they did on certain tasks compared to how they actually did. These students were given tests in logical reasoning, grammar, and even something subjective such as humor. After each test, students were asked to estimate how well they thought they did compared to others of their group. What they found was striking. The students who scored the lowest consistently overestimated their results by a wide margin. They thought that they were above average, sometimes way above average, when in actuality, they were still at the bottom. In contrast, top performers underestimated themselves, assuming that everyone else did just as well as they did. In the final experiment, Dunning-Kruger gave some of the subjects some logic training, and surprisingly, these participants were able to gauge their own assessments more accurately than the others. If we take a look at this table, specifically the trained portion of it, we see that the estimated results grew way closer to the actual results than their untrained counterparts. In short, once they knew more, they realized how little they knew before. This confirmed their key idea, that incompetence doesn't just lead people to make mistakes, it robs them the ability to realize that they're actually making them. After realizing exactly what this effect is, you could start recognizing it in your everyday life. Have you ever taken a test where you felt super confident and ended up failing? That's Dunning-Kruger. How about how anti-vaxxers just believe that they're right about whatever it is that they're spewing? If you ever wanted to torture yourself, I present you the 2025 equivalent of getting a metal bowl with a rat, putting it on top of your stomach, and then placing hot coals on top of it. Jubilee videos. In case you're unaware, Jubilee is a YouTube channel with over 10.2 million subscribers at the time of writing this video. On this channel, they facilitate communication of juxtaposed positions on certain controversial issues such as the accumulation of wealth, the political spectrum, or even religion. At least, this is what it's meant to be. If you couldn't tell by my previous language concerning this channel, I don't really like them. I believe that we do need this type of discourse in order to reach a consensus during this incredibly polarizing time. We live in these echo chambers in our lives and online, and stepping out of these echo chambers allow us to further our own knowledge. However, Jubilee doesn't do that. What they manage to do is give the worst person that you can think of, and by the way, I mean literal fascists, a platform so that they can spew whatever type of trash they want to their audience. This isn't even the cherry on the metaphorical cake. The format of the videos that they create doesn't even allow for a proper discussion. They're rushed and aggressive, and it seems to bring people towards the extremes instead of bringing people to a common understanding. But that's the point of the videos. That's also how you produce the most watched videos consistently on their channel. Get a known figure and then get a random person to spread some absurd nonsense that then Jubilee can use to make a viral video and viral TikTok clips based on their absurd perspectives. It was never meant to be a conversation. It was always meant to be content. Either way, I'm sorry for the tangent. I'll get on with the rest of the video and I'll stop the Jubilee hate for now. But how does this tie in with anti-vaxxers? I want to introduce you to echo chambers. If you're chronically online like me, I'm sure you already know what this is, but if you touch grass on a daily basis, allow me to explain. Echo chambers are an online phenomenon that allow people to follow like-minded communities that allow them to reverberate ideas off of each other. Every meme, every post, every comment reinforces the main idea, whether it's based in fact or it's based in falsehood. The Dunning-Kruger effect comes into play here because with this fabricated consensus, people will start to believe themselves to be speakers of the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. With anti-vaxxers specifically, maybe somebody's looking about a question about vaccine safety. Somebody pops into a subreddit that just so happens to be against vaccines heavily, and now they're bombarded with claims of evidence and conspiracy theories. It also doesn't help that we have a human being controlled by a worm as the Health Secretary of the United States, a position of power that carries the assumption of supposed expertise. With constant reinforcement with no credible pushback, these keyboard warriors convince themselves to be smarter than classically trained scientists. Dunning-Kruger in effect. They are too incompetent to realize that they are incompetent. Echo chambers just don't make people wrong, they make them confidently wrong, which is a dangerous combination. I forgot where I saw this during my research, so if anybody of you find a source for this, please list it in the comments and I'll make sure to source them. But I like the way they worded this. It was a statement that said, just because you know about the Dunning-Kruger effect, that you think you cannot be affected by it, you were just affected by the Dunning-Kruger effect. After taking this trip with me, I hope you're a bit more conscious about your shortcomings. We may not be able to overcome our own incompetence, but hopefully we can make strides into closing the gap between skill and confidence. Low skill and high confidence breeds an individual who thinks themselves as a genius, helping the lesser advanced populace. On the other hand, high skill and low confidence causes people to second guess themselves and hesitate to speak, even though that they are right. Finding the sweet spot may be the challenge of a lifetime. Enough skill to know your stuff, and enough humility to know that you could still be wrong. So the moral of the story, whether you're robbing a bank or debating a vaccine against a licensed doctor, don't be a wheeler. Double check your ego before you realize that you're the one with lemon juice on your face. My name is HugoIsHorrible, and I thank you for watching my video. Peace.